Welcome back, everybody. We are doing our final micro video of learning module number 2. We're going to be talking about cash flow. And this section is incredibly important. This is where I think a lot of contractors get into trouble and get into trouble early. And it's hard to catch up if you get behind on your cash flow. So I'm going to hand it over to Hank to talk a little bit about it and why it's so important.
Thanks, Lori. In this learning module, we've talked about all this financial information. We talked about, how do you calculate your labor rate? How do you calculate what your vehicles are costing you? How do you calculate other costs that's in your business? We talked a little bit about how to project your revenue, your profit, etc. All of that's fine. And it could all be to the good, meaning you're making money on jobs, you're doing a great job on the project, customers love you. You don't get this part right, you'll be done in under 2 years. And it's unfortunate, it doesn't apply to general contractors. I mean, it's important to general contractors, but they get paid before you get paid. We're going to talk about cash flow, and I've got up here, cash is king, and it is. And I'm pretty passionate about this because you are undertaking a business in an industry that does not pay very well. I mean, in terms of timeliness, it just doesn't. It's a screwy system. It's a system that says we're not going to pay you up front, number one, which is unheard of in most cases. Go hire somebody to fix your refrigerator and see if they'll walk in your house and fix that refrigerator without you giving them a credit card number. Doesn't happen anymore. Go have somebody do work on your house where they say, yeah, don't worry about it. You can pay me when I'm 50% done with the job. Doesn't happen. They want money up front. Maybe it's a deposit. Consequently, cash is king. If you're going to focus on one thing, this is the one part you want to focus on. So I have this oddball saying at the beginning of this, regardless of how your business is succeeding, you may not have enough cash for your business to succeed. That's not a misnomer. I didn't mistype that. That is exactly what you have to think of. You could be making money on projects in terms of them being profitable, but you don't have any cash and you're not getting the cash. So that's important to understand. So some factors that affect this: timely billings. If you don't bill people in a timely fashion, that will affect your cash flow. It's not about collections sometimes. It's people just don't bill. I ran a business that had a half a dozen project managers. Every one of those project managers had their own projects. Some of them were really good about doing billing, and some of them were disasters. And their attitude was, what are you worried about, Hank? We'll get paid eventually. Well, I don't worry about that. How would you like if I said, don't worry about your paycheck this month or this week. You'll get paid eventually. Nobody would ever work for anybody if that happened. So timely billings, billing terms. Now you think, what do you mean? Well, I did work for a very large company, corporation, publicly traded. Their billing terms on work, and I was working directly for the company, were 120 days. So if I bill them in September, I'm not getting my money until January. Now you think that's crazy. It happens out there. Billing terms, retention. So for those of you who don't know what retention is, and this varies across the US, it says, I send somebody a bill, they hold money back. That's what retention is. It can be anywhere from 5 to 10%. So I send a bill out for $10,000. If it's 10%, they're only going to pay me $9,000. They keep $1,000. Now, if you do that once in a while and it's for $500, it's not the end of the world. But what happens if you're doing a $100,000 project that lasts a year? You send the first bill out for $10,000. They hold $1,000. Guess what? You're not going to see that $1,000 for 12 months minimum. So it's important to understand that. Collections. Did you bill? I always say bill often, bill now. Retention, collections will affect it. I will tell you that if you don't have the stomach to get on a phone with a customer, whether it be an owner of a building, a director of facilities, a general contractor, a developer, I don't care who it is, and say, look I sent you a bill 4 months ago. I've never been paid. If you don't have the stomach to do that, this business is going to be really difficult for you, because this is about conflict and you're going to run into this. It's not a bad thing to call somebody and go, look it, I sent you a bill 6 months ago. You never paid me. The project is finished. There were no problems on the job. You're happy with the work. I have got to get paid. And here's the problem. There are many customers out there, many businesses, they don't even think twice about waiting 100 days to pay you. Or I'm not even paying anybody unless they call and bitch. Excuse my French, but that's the way it works. So that can affect cash flow. Profitable projects. So listen, if you're in the contracting world and you're in it for any length of time, you will have projects that don't make money. It's just the nature of the beast. May not even be your fault, but you will have projects that don't make money. So guess what? If you sell a project for $20,000 and it loses $2,000, so it costs you $22 to put it in, and you thought you were really going to make $5,000 of profit, you're upside down by $7,000. That affects cash flow. So that can affect it. Change orders and extras can affect it. So you really, cash flow is a big, big deal. Final thing I have on here, starting work without a formal contract. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would anybody do that? Well, trust me. Somebody will say, hey, I need you to get started on Tuesday. I'll mail you the contract on Friday. Well, now guess what? You just started work and you don't have a contract. Now, if it's your buddy and you've known him for 20 years and you've done work with them before, you might reach a point where you can trust them. But what about somebody who says, start the work now and I'll get you PO in a week, and a week goes by and no PO. And meanwhile, you've done work on the building. You bought material, you bought equipment, and another week goes by and you still don't have it. And you call the guy up, oh, yeah, I'll get it for you. Trust me, I've been down all of these roads before. They get ugly quickly. I've been in court with people where I've had project managers start projects, and 6 months later, we're into the project for 100 grand. We still don't have a purchase order. And then you call and it's like, oh yeah, the guy's upset or he's got money problems. I'm telling you, you need to really be diligent about keeping your cash flow going in the right direction.
And Hank, before we leave this slide, I want to talk about retention and collections in particular.
Yes.
Because it's not unusual. It's not an exception to the rule that somebody is going to hang on to a big chunk of your money. Because let's be honest, and not to besmirch general contractors, but if you're working for a general contractor, they're generally going to treat you as their bank. Oh. And I mean, I've heard a ton of horror stories about contractors who did work, who didn't get paid for it for years.
I'll chime in with one of my better horror stories. I got a lot of these. So we did work for a professional sports team. I'm not going to tell you which one. And it was like $1.5 million contract. And there was an owner's rep involved. That was a go-between between the contractors and the owner. And their job was to be an owner's rep, or their job was to hold on to money. I'm not really sure what their job was, and I got along with them. That was the best part. And the general contractor was a U.S. national general contractor, big general contractor. Consequently, job gets finished and it's in 2 phases. We get phase 1 done, and the sports team is playing in this stadium. And lo and behold, I waited a year. Sports team played an entire season before I collected my retention, which in this particular case was $150,000. Now, thank goodness I was working for a company at the time that could afford to do that. But I cannot tell you how many phone calls I made in that 12-month period, like, where's my money? It's incredible. And they always have crazy reasons why not to pay it. You didn't fill out the form right. You filled it out on a blue form when it should have been a yellow form. It's just crazy. So every state is different. That's why it's important to read the specifications, understand what you're signing to find out what that retention is. Maybe they're holding 10% and that's what was in the terms and conditions. Maybe you can change it. It depends. So it is important to understand it affects cash flow if the retention isn't right. So anyway, does that answer your question, Lori?
It absolutely does. And it kind of leads into re-emphasizing the next point, collections. You can't be shy about collecting. You have to
No.
collect. And it's a really good idea to have a good collections attorney as part of your team of professionals, because there are going to be times when you have no choice but to take somebody to court, or at least have your lawyer send them a nasty letter laying out why them not paying you is illegal. So
When
don't
I
be
took over this mechanical contractor in Milwaukee, I went almost 5 years. It seemed like every month, every quarter, I was dealing with a legal issue over collections. It took me 5 years to clean it up because we had started jobs without contracts. We had not read the specifications properly. We made agreements we should have never made. The list goes on. And even if you do everything right, you're still going to end up with collection problems. It's just inevitable. It just is inevitable. It will happen. So when we get to the attorney section of this, we'll talk about that. And it took me 2 years to get a good attorney. When I got one, I got a good one that could collect money for me. And you know what? That was great. But the 2 years that I lived with it without it was terrible because the attorney we had it's kind of unfortunate. It's nature of the beast, and you got to be willing to roll your sleeves up and get into the ring, so to speak, because you're going to get into a fist fight in this business, whether it be over billings or collections. It's going to happen.
And also, when we get into the later learning module on union financial commitments, you're going to see again why it's so important to have a positive cash flow, because you need to make your benefit payments and your payroll on time every single month. Otherwise, you get into legal trouble. You have interest and penalties building on top of that. So, even if you're not getting paid on time or not getting paid in full, you still have to pay your employees on time and in full, not just their base wage, but also their benefits, which is why it's so important to be on top of collecting, because it can make the difference between staying in business and not.
So I got a little example here. Cash is king. Now, you might look at this and go, this is pretty simplistic, but trust me, it may appear to be simplistic, and it may appear to be like, how could that ever happen? But it does. So I sell a project for $24,000. The project has a cost of $20,000, 20% markup. The project is 80% complete. I have a current cost of $16,000. I've only billed $6,000, and I've only been paid $2,400. Now you look at this and you go, if your cost is $16,000, why have you only billed $6,000? It happens. You're busy with 100 things. You miss this, or the timing could be off. You sent the bill in on the 20th of the month, and a bunch of costs hit the job before the end of the month, and now all of a sudden your cost is up to $16,000. I mean, there's a variety of reasons, and they're behind paying you. I mean, that's just the way it can happen. Now, this is pretty small, 24,000. There's not a ton of risk out here. Just imagine if this was a $250,000 project. 2 questions for our participants. What should your billing be? We know that this isn't right. What should it be? And how much should you have been paid? So why don't we put this on pause for 30 seconds, let you think about that, and then we'll go from there. Okay. So same example we just did. So what should your billing be? Well, it should be $19,200. So that's $16,000 in cost times 1.2, 20% markup. That's what your billing should be. Now that also happens to be 80% of the job. So when the project is 80% complete, you should be billed to 80% of whatever your sell price is. So 80% of 24,000 is 19,200. So right out of the gate, you're way under for billings. How much should you have been paid? Well, you only billed 6,000. So you really should be paid 6,000. That's what you billed. But this project is underbilled and it's underpaid currently. So it's just a disaster all the way around. Now magnify this times 10 projects, and this can get ugly fast. So in essence, you are financing this project. And the reason I say that is you have cost of 16,000, labor and material, subcontracting, whatever. You have a cost of 16,000. You've only been paid 2,400. So you're financing the difference on this. And in reality is you should have been at 19,200 in terms of your billing. You should be paid 19,200. You've only been paid 2,400. You just went from being Acme plumbing business to Acme Finance Group, because you're financing this project for whoever you're working for, whether it be the general contractor or the owner. You're financing the project. And as I used to remind people who work for me and customers, I am not a bank. I am a contractor. I need to get paid for what I do. I'm not here to finance things for you. Kind of a simplistic problem that can get magnified very much. So it's important that you review your accounts receivable every single month. And I don't care if you're a small business or you're a big business. I don't care whether you're starting a business or you just bought a business. This number needs to get reviewed all the time, because if you buy a big established business, it won't be one project in a month like this. You might have 50 projects like this, and it can add up quickly. Okay, so we talked a little bit about this project and how important cash flow is. So some high points here. Cash flow starts with good billing. So that's where it starts. Some people think cash flow starts with collection. And from my experience, cash flow starts with good billing. When billing, here's the tricky part with construction work. If you're working for general contractors and they may say, you got to have your bill to me by the 20th of the month. You have to bill based on where you're going to be at the end of the month. So 10 days. Now you think, well, how much could happen? Well, a lot could happen. You might have ordered equipment for the job and it's about to arrive and it's not there yet, so it hasn't hit your books yet. You got to anticipate, pull out your crystal ball and go, okay, here's what's going to hit this job in the next 10 days. And that's based on a 20th of the month. Billing due dates could be the 25th, could be the 15th. So you got to understand and anticipate where your costs are going to be, and that's where your bill is. So if you have a cost of $5,000 on the 20th of the month, and you got all kinds of labor, material, and equipment that's got to get done in the next 10 days, well, then you've got to say, well, my gosh, I got to bill more than $5,000. I got to bill $10,000, even though it's not there yet. Okay, that's an important factor, and it's a factor that can really affect your cash flow. As my next bullet item says, you can never bill early enough on a project. It just is inevitable. It may take you 60 to 120 days to get paid. I would say if you're doing work for a client, a customer, a building owner, don't be afraid to say, hey, I'd like to get 25% up front on the project. Now, that sounds like heresy in our industry. But I would tell you, do it. Because the worst they can say is, are you out of your mind? I'm not giving you 25% up front. The best they could do is say, okay, I'll give you the 25%. And now at least you have some cash to work with. If you're doing residential work, you absolutely, positively need to be getting money up front. You want to get, say, 25% up front, maybe even 50% up front. Commercial work's a little different. The first time I ever asked for money up front, I was working for Johnson Controls at the time. It was a big hospital project. I'm in a meeting with the owner, the developer, the general contractor, and I brought up getting paid up front. And the general contractor looked me in the eye, and this was a friend of mine, and said, Hank, are you out of your mind that you think we're going to pay you up front? Well, lo and behold, thank goodness the owner was there. And the owner said, I'll pay you up front if you give me a discount on the job. And that's how the discussion started. And guess what? By the time it was done, I got paid 50% up front. Consequently, you never know what's going to happen with it. Always review your accounts receivables each month. Don't be afraid to ask for money. Important to do. Staying cash positive can be a difficult task in the contracting business, especially at the beginning when you don't have enough projects going on. So now it's not like if you have 50 projects on the books, some projects you might be behind on cash, some projects might be ahead on cash. Overall, you might be okay. But when you only have 5 projects or 8 projects on the books, you need to be very diligent about making sure you are staying cash positive. You don't want to become a bank. You don't want to be financing it, particularly if you're working for general contractors who are notorious for holding on to the money. I mean, they'll hold on to the money as long as they can. And again, you don't want to get into a situation where you get behind. It's hard to fix it. All of your vendors and suppliers, they want to be paid. Your attorney wants to be paid. Your union funds have to be paid. All of it has to be paid, sometimes on a weekly basis. You can't wait 6 months to get paid or 3 months to get paid. And you got to be willing to get on the phone and chase that money down. You worked hard for it. Go ask for it. Don't be afraid to it. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, why would somebody be afraid to ask for money? Well, tell me. I've had people that work for me that would say, Hank, I don't really like conflict. So I don't really want to call and make that phone call. I'd be like, conflict? The whole industry is conflict. How could you not want to make that phone call? We worked hard for that money. We provided a service to a customer, a really good service. I expect to be paid. You got to look at it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And I think
And it's natural to be afraid of that conflict. And I think one thing that kind of helps you overcome that is thinking about, okay, what happens if I don't collect? I can't pay my people. They can't put food on their table if I'm not collecting the money that we earned. So,
right.
Just try to think of it in those terms.
Yeah, it's a bit mind-boggling how in an organization, people are afraid to ask for money. Mm-hmm. It's like, we're not the Salvation Army. It's not the church. We're running a business and we provide a service for that business.
Right.
If it's a plumbing business, you did plumbing work, whether it be in a commercial building or whether it be in a residential, you deserve to be paid, and you shouldn't have to feel bad about saying, hey, I need to get paid from that standpoint. It's important. Cash is king. I cannot stress this more. You can get everything else right in running a contracting business. Get this one wrong, and you're going to be in a lot of trouble very quickly. You can get this one right, get the other ones wrong, you can survive a little bit. But you got to really focus on getting your cash, because it's just an industry that takes a long time sometimes to collect money.
Absolutely. Well, great. Thank you, Hank. This has been an incredibly educational module. I know there was a lot of information, so I appreciate you breaking it down into chunks that are digestible. And those of you in the audience, I appreciate you hanging in there with us to walk through it.
Great. Thanks, Laurie.
Thank you. And we'll see you in the next learning module.
Great.
Take care.